Hello, everyone. If you're here, say hello in the chat so I know you're here. We are in 1788 tonight, so see, notice I look a little different than I did in 1766, and I have this little spot on my nose from my glasses. LB Girl 88, hello, it's nice to see you. Thank you for joining me here tonight, everyone. I'm afraid my hair is so big tonight that I can't fit it into the frame. But that is fashion for you, isn't it? That's fashion throughout the years. I'll wait a couple of minutes for some more people to join us. Hopefully, we'll have all of our regulars tonight. Hello, Mr. Davis. It's nice to see you again. Thank you for joining me. Let me see if I can adjust this a little bit better. I haven't worn this jacket in a long time. Ms. Quellers, nice to see you. Love the hair. I do too. You might remember, oh my goodness, we don't want that showing. It has been a long time since I've worn this jacket because I've been doing 1770s. And I haven't worn this in a while, so I'm a little trouble getting it to fit properly. I love the hair too, and some of you might remember that for quite a long time in New York that this was my favorite wig, and I wore it whenever I had a chance. But since I've been doing 1770s with you, I haven't been able to quite do this big hair, which I really, really love. And actually, my own personal hair probably could do this if I wanted to do it because it's so curly and thick. But I love this period with the super, super big hair. And some of you might have seen a picture I put this past week on social media showing me with 1780s hair and me with 1980s hair. It was pretty amusing because I'm sure a lot of you remember the big hair of the 1980s, which was really similar to the big hair of the 1780s. Thank you, Hannah. I like blue too. And this is one of the few blue outfits I have. This is blue Indonesian silk. And this silk was actually a gift to me a number of years ago from a childhood friend, someone that I grew up with, and we lost touch with each other over the years. We got back in touch, and she had been given, maybe 10 yards of this silk that she had for years. She didn't know what to do with it, and she sent it to me, and I made this jacket, and it came out great. And it's one of my favorite outfits to wear when I'm doing this period, when I can get out the silks and frills and things when they were, more popular after the war. During the war, we're a little bit more austere. Mr. Tulloch says, salutations, Mrs. Q. Are you acquainted with the distinguished painter John Trumbull? I just finished an excellent book about him. Indeed, I am familiar with Mr. John Trumbull and his paintings, and also the period of his life in which he was very unhappy in the American Army and decided to leave and go to England and learn to paint in the studio of Mr. Benjamin West. So very interesting part of Mr. John Trumbull's life, and then came back, and as some of you might know, painted everybody who was anybody during the American Revolution. So Mr. Trumbull, a very famous painter and a very interesting life as well. So you can see that I probably should have put some of that light makeup on my chest because you can see here the difference in my real color and the color of my makeup. I didn't even think to do it. A lady of Mrs. Q's stature would not have this tan at all. Her whole body would be light like this. My arms are quite a bit tan as well. As I mentioned in previous weeks, I've been doing a lot of yard work. So anyway, so tonight is 1788. Hello, Mr. Fiore. It's so nice to see you here. Thank you so much for joining in tonight. Tonight it is the summer of 1788. And you can see I have a little bit of a different background tonight. So we have a later Georgian period, like drawing room, sitting room behind me. So later period, the colors are a little bit brighter than the colors I usually have in the room behind me. So I'm trying to portray a later bit of a period tonight because I thought I would talk a little bit about the history of people loving to hate the city of New York in order to get a really good view of a good arc of time in which that occurred. We wanted to go up to 1788 when the ratification convention for the United States Constitution was being held. And I'm sorry for laughing, but New York history is always, crazy. That's why it's so much fun to study. Mr. White is here. Mr. West, originally from the Lancaster area. Mr. White, do you know if it was Mr. West who painted with Major Andre when he was in the prison camp in Lancaster? I think Mr. West might have already been in England by then. As you know, and some of you might know, Major John Andre spent about a year in a prisoners camp in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And during that time, he taught the young people in the area to draw and to paint. And I wasn't sure if, I think Benjamin West was probably already in England at that time. Anyway, Mr. West painted all of our great taught all of our great painters. And you know what? Maybe let's see, next week is Battle of New York we'll have to talk about. But one night we'll talk about the Revolutionary War painters because I've done a bit of work on them and I have a lot of samples of their portraits, many of which you have seen in many historical, events, lectures at the White House, various places like that. Ms. Silver says, hi, Mrs. Q. I love the old New York, not sure about the new New York. Well, me too. Hannah says, I'm writing a biography on Andre. Wonderful. Mr. White says he was in England at the time. I thought Mr. West was already in England at that time. So we'll talk about the painters one night because that's a nice topic. So let's say it's the summer of 1788 and the ratification convention is going on here in New York, north of New York City at Poughkeepsie. And what an incredible series of events we have seen here in New York over this new United States Constitution. Now, we got started all on this story this evening when Mr. Q and I were out to dinner with our good friends, Mr. and Mrs. R. We went up to Mr. Sam Francis' place on the Broadway to have some of his famous chicken pot pie, which I think was one of General Washington's favorite dishes that was cooked by Mr. Francis during the war years. So we went up. It's a beautiful summer night. We had dinner on the Broadway and walked home. But while we were at dinner, we somehow got into this conversation of how much the rest of, well, now our states, but previously our colonies, have always loved to hate New York. And we got to really laughing about it quite a bit. And so I thought I would go over the history of everyone loving to hate New York, which right now in 1788, people are really loving to hate us over the United States Constitution. Mr. Facemeyer says, hello, Mrs. Q from Manassas, Virginia. Hello, Mr. Facemeyer. So as you know, the gentlemen have written a United States Constitution, and it is now up to the states to ratify this Constitution. And 9 states have ratified the Constitution and not New York. Of course, not New York. And so our friends to the north hate us right now because they feel that we are delaying the Constitution. And our friends to the south are angry at us because they fear we will ratify the Constitution. So either way, everyone is angry at New York once again. And we New Yorkers, of course, are taking this all in stride because everyone has been angry at New York pretty much all of my life. So it's nothing new to us. Mr. Linden says, missing because YouTube suddenly interrupted with ads. Oh no, I didn't know YouTube was running ads on this tonight. I usually turn off the monetization, and I am sorry I forgot to turn it off this time. So please excuse that. You can always, if you use Facebook, hop on over and watch it on my Facebook page as well. So I apologize to all of you on YouTube who are getting ads. That was my mistake when I was creating the event today, and I will be sure to fix it next week. So I'm very sorry about that. I usually only run these in monetization after they have live streamed, so please excuse me for that. So here we are in New York, trying to decide whether or not to ratify the United States Constitution. And it's quite controversial, of course, because we have the two loudest voices for and against ratifying the Constitution, or I should say two of them, right here in New York. Mr. Hamilton, of course, who is advocating ratification, and Mr. Clinton, Mr. Smith, Melancton Smith, and a number of others who are against ratification. Now, you probably know that Mr. Hamilton, along with Mr. Madison and Mr. Jay, have written a series of articles encouraging ratification of the Constitution. They've written 85 of those articles, and those articles are in response to letters written by gentlemen and a lady who, in my time, we don't know who it is, but in your time, it will be revealed that that lady is Mrs. Mercy Otis Warren from Massachusetts, all against ratifying the Constitution. So there were so many articles and letters and complaints and questions that those gentlemen chose to write a series of articles answering those questions. So we have Mr. Hamilton writing on one side as Publius, and Mr. Jay, also from New York, Mr. Madison from Virginia, and they are debating Mr. Smith and Mr. Clinton in New York, who are writing as Cato. Now, there are also other writers from around the states who do not want to ratify the Constitution. There are writers from Massachusetts, writers from Virginia, writers from Pennsylvania, all what we call anti-federalists who have written against ratification. But I'm just talking about us in New York tonight. I don't want to slight any of those great gentlemen from the other states who have also written very good criticism of the Constitution. So here in New York, we have our ratification convention is in process. And it doesn't seem to be going very well, as I heard from Mrs. J that Mr. J remarked to her, every anti-federalist you know is here. They're all speaking and they're all making it very difficult to get our point across, or very difficult to make this happen, which sounds somewhat at odds with Mr. Melancton Smith, who is the leader of the anti-federalist delegation there, who recently remarked that the anti-federalists were like a herd of sheep dispersed upon a hill. So it seems like it is a typical New York convention. As we spoke many times in the past about our New York Assembly being, doing virtually nothing except arguing a lot, it seems that our Constitution Ratification Convention is doing the same, that it's a lot of gentlemen together, they're all arguing, and no one is really getting anywhere. So it's a pretty typical scenario for New York. But everyone being mad at New York doesn't start here in 1788. It starts, let's say let's start in 1765. Let's start there. Now, I do also want to say that here in New York, there is a great deal of animosity between the gentlemen who are allied with Mr. Hamilton and those who are against Mr. Hamilton. And it is very strange to see this kind of animosity between people who were all advocates of separating from England. So we have the same gentlemen who were advocates for separating from England, who may have fought together during the war with England, the late war, who are now against each other because they have a different view of what our nation ought to be in the future. And so that is what we're experiencing here in New York. Now, Mr. Q believes the convention will ultimately ratify the Constitution with some demands, as he has been speaking to some of the men, and they believe that there will be a demand for some type of modification or addendum to the Constitution, perhaps a Bill of Rights. Perhaps we'll call it a Bill of Rights. And with that, New York will ultimately ratify the Constitution. Oh, before I forget, my sister from Albany, Mrs. Van R., also told me a rather hair-raising story about an event that recently occurred there. And that is that the Federalists in Albany desired to have a parade to celebrate ratification of the Constitution. And the anti-federalists pulled up a cannon full of stones and rocks and debris and threatened to fire it at them when they passed if they dared to have such a parade. So you can see that it's not just here in the city where we are heavily divided, but they seem to be divided up around Mrs. Van R's home as well. And just in general, down here in the city of New York, along the Hudson Valley to Albany, are mostly in favor of ratification, and the rest of our state is against ratification. And somehow I think that that might come to be the future politics of New York, but we'll see how that works out in the future. So we were having a good time over dinner at Mr. France's place, discussing all of the times the other colonies have hated New York. Now, if you think I am outspoken, you ought to meet Mrs. R. Mr. and Mrs. R, of course, are printers, and it is quite a demanding job for a lady to be a printer. So she is quite a strong and outspoken lady. And of course, like us, the R's had to leave New York during the late war. So they were also exiled for 7 years and then returned, restarted their printing company and printing their newspapers and pamphlets and things. And so they have been printing some of the anti-federalist articles. And they were expressing their extreme dislike of Mr. Hamilton tonight, and that Mr. Hamilton at one time in 1775 wrote a series of articles in Mr. Holt's newspaper called The Monitor. And I think there were 17 installments of that in which he vocally expressed why we should separate from England. Very brave and very well-written works for 17 weeks. Of course, anonymously, only a handful of people at that time knew who wrote it. And they really were expressing their anger at Mr. Hamilton at a number of things he did right after the war, including the Constitutional Convention, as it's called now. It was really the Federal Convention. So right away, when Mr. Hamilton returned to New York, he advocated amnesty for loyalists, which of course went through, much to the dismay of many people who lost their homes here to loyalists who lived here during the war. So they expressed their being upset about that. But what they really expressed, which many here in the city are upset about, is that when the Federal Convention convened in Philadelphia, it was meant to repair the Articles of Confederation, which created our wartime government and the government we have now. And the intent was to go and to propose changes to that system that would better suit us as a united entity. And instead, Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Madison attended and turned it into a convention to write something new. Now, the delegation from New York was given the right only to amend the Articles of Confederation, and I believe the Virginians were as well. So Mr. Madison was not acting on behalf of the people of Virginia, as Mr. Hamilton was not acting on behalf of the people of New York either, when they both turned their back on their instructions and decided to create a whole new government. There were 3 delegates to the convention from New York, and the 2 who were with Mr. Madison left, and a number left from Virginia as well, because they said that this was against the instructions they had received from New York. This made the situation such that Hamilton himself could not vote on the final document. He could not, vote to pass the final document because instructions to New York was all 3 had to be present to vote. So although he wrote most of it and contributed a great deal to it, he and Mr. Madison, he was unable to actually vote in the convention to pass that document on to the states for ratification. So Mr. and Mrs. R were just talking about their dismay at Mr. Hamilton because he had been such an ardent patriot before the war and had risked his own personal safety by writing those letters, and also, of course, served honorably in the army under the command of General Washington. So they were speaking of Mr. Hamilton's duplicity in these things, as they believe that Mr. Hamilton is now proposing a government to us that would be more powerful and oppressive than the one we left behind. And we will see how all of that works out. So let's go into the past and talk about everyone's love for hating New York. My sister, Mrs. Van R, always says that everyone loves to hate New York because they all know that we are superior in every way. We are superior in our education. We are superior in our culture. We are superior in our intellect. We are simply superior in every way, and therefore everyone must hate us. And that is Mrs. Van R's view of why everyone hates New York. And I would say Mrs. Van R's view is a pretty common and typical view of New York. So let us go back to 1765 and the Stamp Act. The Stamp Act. Remember the Stamp Act? That was how this all really got started, when the Crown and the Parliament decided to tax paper here in the colonies to raise money to pay for the French and Indian War and our current and future defense. And everyone protested against the Stamp Act, which was quite an outrageous thing to do at the time. People at that time had not joined up and gone into the streets and protested the government before. We had, differences of opinion and letter writing and things like that, and, the whole little things that went on before, but nothing as big and as stunning as the protests against the Stamp Act. So while gentlemen like Mr. Q were out risking our safety and security by protesting against the government and the Stamp Act, Mr. Franklin, or what do they call him in Philadelphia? Dr. Franklin, Mr. Franklin, Dr. Franklin, out of the Philadelphians, they think they're the best too, of course. So the Philadelphians believe that they're superior to us, and the Bostonians believe they're superior to both of us. But we all know New Yorkers are really superior to everyone. So while Mr. Q and Mr. R and Mr. Van R and many other gentlemen I know were out protesting the Stamp Act, what was Mr. Benjamin Franklin, Pennsylvania's agent to the Parliament, writing back to the agent here in America? He says, the favor of the colonial people must always be sacrificed in any clash with authority of Great Britain. Well, Dr. Franklin, what is this that you are saying that the favor of the colonial people, goodbye to that when it comes to clashing with the authority of Great Britain? So that was Mr. Franklin's view in 1765. Well, of course, that changed over time, didn't it? And Mr. Franklin then, realized that England was oppressive and abusive, and he came back to America and joined as a member of the Continental Congress and advocating separation from England. But I just thought it was a little interesting to see that Mr. Franklin was a little bit slow to come around when other gentlemen were already very clearly expressing their anger at Britain. Oh, and by the way, wasn't Mr. Franklin's son the royal governor of New Jersey appointed by King George III? Yes, he was. And of course, that caused a lifelong separation between Mr. Franklin and Governor Franklin, in which they never spoke again after, I think, 1777. Oh, we have a lot of great comments here. Let's see. Mr. Linden said, here, here. Like something I said. Miss Nespoli says, they are here. Nice. Oh, Miss Wetzel, I'm sorry. I need my non-period correct glasses. Oh, Miss Wetzel says, we are here. Thank you. Mr. Tuttle loves the enthusiasm, but we must be enthusiastic. After all, it is 1788. Miss Anderson is here. She says she's late, but good evening. Good evening to you. Ms. Wetzel wants to know, is that due to his son's influence? Yes. Oh, and you said just answered your question. Yes. When Governor Franklin refused to step down from his royal position, he and his father were separated for all time. Right? Mr. Franklin actually voted to have his son, excuse me, arrested and imprisoned in Connecticut. So a very sad situation there. But I just liked this little quote tonight from Mr. Franklin before he decided really to get on the right side. Now, why was everybody mad at New York over the Stamp Act? We were the first to refuse commerce with England. You might remember right when the Stamp Act went into effect on November 1st of 1765, 200 New York merchants, including my father, signed the document declaring that we would not trade with England beginning January 1st of the coming year if they did not repeal the Stamp Act. So how did we go, New York, from leading the non-importation, non-exportation agreement of 1765? How did we go from leading that to everyone being so angry at us? Well, actually, I should say, how did we go from everybody being so angry at us to leading that? Because everyone was angry at us even before we entered into the non-importation, non-exportation agreement. And that was because in October of 1765, we hosted the Stamp Act Congress, the first ever Congress of the American colonies, where we invited delegates from all of the other colonies to come to New York as a Congress and discuss how to oppose the Stamp Act. And that met here in October. And not all colonies were able to send representatives, such as Virginia, because the Virginia governor dissolved their House of Burgesses, which then made it impossible for them to select delegates to come. But 11 colonies did come. And for the first time, all met each other, which was quite exciting for all of us to see, people arriving from other colonies who we had never met before. It was very exciting. The convention was held at Wall Street at the City Hall, and they wrote a document. I think, what was it? The Resolves of the Stamp Act Congress. And you will not believe this. Maybe you will. New York refused to sign the document. So we protested the Stamp Act. We had our huge Stamp Act riots. All sorts of things went on in New York. We even invited everyone here to a Congress, but when it came down to it, New York would not sign the resolves of the Stamp Act Congress, which is quite bad, but it wasn't as bad as the delegates from, was it Massachusetts and Virginia, who nearly got into a duel over insulting each other on the floor of that Congress. And the duel, of course, didn't happen because one of them, I forgot which one, skipped out of New York before dawn the next day. So it was quite an exciting experience for all. But because we would not sign on to that document, of course, everyone was angry at us. Everyone disliked New York again. It's always the same story. No one can trust New York. It's full of Tories. You never know which way New York will go. You can't trust New York. They'll always do whatever is only in their own interest. And so, less than 1 month, a few weeks after everyone was mad at us over the Stamp Act Congress, we signed the non-importation, non-exportation agreement. I should say, not only did we sign it, we originated it. It originated here in New York. We were the first to declare no trade with England unless the Stamp Act was repealed. And I'm very happy to say that my own father was a signatory to that document. So here we have everyone mad at us in 1765, 1766. Oh, everyone mad at New York. And then things settled down a little bit, didn't they? We got past the Stamp Act, that was repealed. And then we went on to the Quartering Act. And everyone got mad at us again. Because I'm very sorry to say, when the colonies united again to oppose the Quartering Act, New York instead appropriated money for the troops based here in New York. I know it was a terrible thing. The colonies can only, win if we're united. And all of a sudden, New York says, we're sorry, we're going to appropriate the money for the troops here in New York. We broke the unity of the colonies. The other colonies were furious. Over at the College of New Jersey, which you know as Princeton, they held a funeral march for New York. Philadelphia sent us a now famous letter that said, please send us your Liberty Pole, as it seems you no longer have a use for it. And everyone, of course, was now angry at New York for appropriating the money for the Quartering Act and breaking the unity of the colonies. But keep in mind, that was only one part of New York, as we are always a very divided colony and now state, as we are divided now over the constitutional, over ratifying the Constitution. And a broadside came out explaining that that assembly that appropriated the funds had been elected through voter fraud. Voter fraud. They were all Tories and they passed the appropriations. Well, as a result of that, the author of the broadside went to prison, and he stayed in prison or jail for 4 months. The Sons of Liberty celebrated at the jail every day. And suddenly, New York was in favor again because we had a great patriot, a great hero, Captain Alexander McDougall, who they referred to as the Wilkes of the colonies, for the great John Wilkes, our advocate in the British Parliament. Oh, here comes Doggy Q. Here he goes. You can probably hear his tail wagging. He's in. Oh, here he is. He has his little food dish with him. Actually, it's a pretty big food dish. And Mr. Q is supposed to be watching him, but see, he's not, as usual. There he goes. I can hear him leaving. So everyone now celebrated Captain McDougall as the Wilkes of the colonies for his bravery. Okay, doggy. Okay, Quincy man. Everyone now celebrating New York for Captain McDougall being so brave to go to jail for the cause. So we love New York, we hate New York, love New York, we hate New York. And then things kind of evened out again, and everyone went back to normal. And then in 1770, everyone hated New York again, because after the celebrated, or I should say, celebrated now, but horrific then, Boston massacre of March 5th, 1770. Remember when those British soldiers shot the crowd of drunken Sons of Liberty in Boston and killed a number in the street? They were then represented by John Adams when he was attorney. Everyone got mad at us again because we declared that the Boston Massacre was not the first bloodshed of the American Revolution. That had already occurred 5 weeks before here in New York at the Battle of Golden Hill. And so everyone was mad at us again for claiming that we had the first bloodshed of the American Revolution. What can I say? Back and forth. And then the Stamp Act, of course, or the Tea Act, of course, where you might know that some of the loudest and most eloquent opponents of the East India Company and the Tea Act were here in New York. Some very prolific and eloquent writers wrote against it. Of course, we had some of the most eloquent supporters of it, including the gentleman who famously suggested that the East India Company was too big to fail. He said, all we have here in the colonies are here due to being a part of the British Empire. Our rule of common law, our protection of the British Empire, protection by their military, our trade, everything we have, the good lives, good free lives we have here are all a result of being a part of the British Empire. And well, part of what makes the British Empire great is the East India Company. So if the East India Company were to fail, we would lose all of that here. In other words, the East India Company failing would cause the British Empire to crumble. And where would we be? All alone by ourselves over here. So the East India Company was too big to fail. And of course, we laughed at that. here. Many of us laughed at that here, but that message was distributed throughout the colonies and, caused quite a bit of anger. Again, everyone looking at New York and saying, you can always depend on New York to find Tories, lovers of the crown, and people who will always stand against what's best for America. Let's see, after the Tea Act, when did everyone get mad at us again? Um, I don't think there was much opportunity after the Tea Act because it wasn't long. Oh, oh, I've forgotten the big one, haven't I? Well, after the Tea Act, when does everyone get the most furious at New York? But in 1776 at the Second Continental Congress, when New York's delegation refuses to debate or vote on a Declaration of Independence. And why did that happen? Well, again, that was mostly the result of our then New York Assembly, which was a rather useless body in which many men met, debated, insulted each other, talked over each other, and didn't accomplish anything. And their instructions to that delegation were none, because the assembly at that time was so evenly divided between rebels and Tories. They sent a delegation, but without any instructions. Also sent a huge delegation, so it's something like 12 men. Um, some rebels, some Tories. It was quite a ridiculous delegation, of course. And they were unable to participate, and which of course made everyone angry at us again. But luckily, that document did get passed and ratified without New York, and we did sign it later. We were a little late, but we did sign it later. So we did get on board. And then, of course, we got a little bit of sympathy in 1776 when the city was invaded and virtually destroyed by the British invasion and occupied for 7 long years. So a little bit of sympathy for us New Yorkers, those of us who lived under occupation, and those of us like me and most of my friends who fled the city for 7 years and had no knowledge of whether or not we would return. So then upon returning, of course, New York makes everyone mad again by saying that loyalists should have some opportunities at amnesty. The idea being that if you were a loyalist and you did not provide material support to the crown or the military, in other words, you didn't serve in a royal regiment and you didn't help to finance or give your crops or anything you made to the British willingly. Of course, they took things all the time, but you didn't help them willingly, that you ought to be allowed to stay. As Mr. Hamilton and Mr. McDougall suggested, they said that many of these people are people who have trade contacts around the world and who are very skilled in the art of finance and business. And why shouldn't they stay and help to make New York a great state? Let them simply take an oath of loyalty to the new nation and allow them to stay and contribute to our future. And we agreed. The state of New York agreed and gave amnesty to many loyalists. And there are still quite a lot of hard feelings around New York over that amnesty. But as time goes on and the state becomes more successful, I think some of those hostilities are going away. Again, that depends on where you live. Here in the city, we tend to be less judgmental and more accepting of things. And this goes back to our founding in 1626, when we have always allowed various people to come here and live without a lot of regard for what language they speak at home, what church they go to on Sunday, as long as it's not Catholic, and other types of differences between us, as New York figured out very early on in our history that we were getting no help from England. And so the best way to help ourselves was to put differences aside and work together for success and prosperity. So we tend to be a little bit more flexible in our views here in the city than they may be out in the countryside. So that was controversial. And of course, we opened our bank, Bank of New York. It didn't bother anyone until the men in New York suggested the National Bank. And again, everyone was angry at New York. so everyone's angry at New York, right? And angry at New York here in 1788, wondering whether or not we will ratify the Constitution. Now, let me tell you a little bit of what I think about this whole constitutional issue. Now, I believe New York will ratify the Constitution, but I also believe that we are in a very good position to make demands about changes to it. Because think of us, we are the biggest, most prosperous port on the East Coast. And what would a new country be with New York right in the middle, not belonging to it? And also, should I say, Rhode Island has not ratified the Constitution either. Another big trading port right near us, right on the other side of the Long Island Sound, we find Rhode Island. And North Carolina, I think it's North Carolina, has also not ratified yet. So we are in a very good position, I think, to make some demands about changing the Constitution. And I trust that that is what Governor Clinton will do, and that we will likely get many of those demands met. And then we'll see how that all plays out in the future between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists as the years go by. My dog Rex just made it. Well, Rex, you just missed my dog, Quintus Fabius Maximus. So thank you all for joining me tonight in my little bit of later 18th century outfit. I just want to say that any of you who are in the northeastern Pennsylvania, southern tier of New York area, and are near Elmira, in 2 weeks, I will be at the Battle of Newtown. I originally thought I would be there on Saturday the 23rd, but I'm going to be there on Sunday the 24th with my production company. I won't be dressed like this. I'll have on, my production company hat and have a crew with me, because we are going to be doing a video shoot there of the battle to use in our upcoming documentary on the Battle of Wyoming. So if you're going to be at the Battle of Newtown on Sunday, look for us. We'll be there shooting the battle. And until next time, I hope you're all wonderful and enjoying the summer. And I will see you next Thursday from here in Hanover Square. Oh, and Mr. White says, please remember to do a thumbs up on my video. Yes, a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others. Once I get this larger video project completed, I am going to go back to releasing a weekly video of my modern self talking about various places and their significance in Revolutionary War history, as I used to do quite a few years ago. I'm going to go back to that. So I'll be returning to more historic videos from the 21st century soon. Ms. Queller says, thank you. Thank all of you. Oh, John the Beagle Dad says, is it too hot for you to do the walking tours anymore in New York City? Well, it's not that it's too hot. It's that even though in the 18th century, I'm in New York City, in the 21st century, I am in Pennsylvania, and I have left New York City and don't do any tours of New York City at all, although I have been invited back for a number of events. I'm going to say, sadly, that I don't have a lot of desire to go to New York to do any historical events. I'm much more interested in discovering the history here in Pennsylvania and the southern tier of New York, as some very interesting Revolutionary War things happened here that I would like to bring to you, rather than go back and keep doing the New York thing. So thank you for asking. If any of you do want to take a tour in New York City, I recommend Bruce Racon, and he is at revolutionarytoursnyc.com. Bruce is wonderful. We used to see each other all the time in Lower Manhattan, and book a tour with him and tell him I sent you. You won't regret it. He's very good. So again, thank you all. All of you have a great night. Mr. White says we have a lot to offer. Indeed, we do, Mr. White. I am going to be going over to the Shades of Death Trail next week and shooting some video at the Shades of Death Trail, which I think is near you. And maybe I'll let you know when we'll be there. So lots of interesting things coming up from my video production company. So thank you very much for sharing a night in the 18th century with me, and I will be back next week. All of you have a wonderful week. Until next time, I'm Mrs. Q.